President Volodymyr Zelensky has ordered military commanders to send reinforcements to help Ukrainian troops defending the besieged city of Bakhmut. Now, doubts are emerging over the strength of Russian forces trying to capture the eastern city. The head of the Wagner mercenary group has admitted that his troops are running out of ammunition. The battle for Bakhmut is the fiercest of the war so far and has cost thousands of lives.
The fighting has been so intense in Bakhmut, one Ukrainian commander described it as utter hell. Now, instead of retreating, these troops will reinforce their positions and attempt to reclaim lost ground. They're determined to save the city, but the enemy is also unrelenting.
I think they throw more forces at us to justify the aim of their so-called special operation. Bakhmut is important because it cuts across roadways and it's higher ground. From its height, everything here is open for the Russians, so it's important for both us and them. So many of them are dying here. I don't understand why.
But Russia's expected spring offensive could hit a snag with apparent disunity in its ranks. Part of its quest to capture Ukraine's Donbas region has been fronted by mercenaries from the Wagner group, who've emerged as rivals of the Russian military, even though they're supposed to be partners. But Wagner's owner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, an ally of Vladimir Putin, is now warning his fighters might not be able to hold on because Moscow has not replenished their ammunition.
If we retreat, then we'll go down in history forever as people who've taken the main step towards losing the war.
Whoever wins control of Bakhmut will not have much of a city left. After 6 months of fighting, its buildings are in ruins and most of its residents have fled. Still, as one of the oldest cities in the Donbas region, it remains symbolic, although the only visible symbol right now is one of devastation.
Now, Ukraine's ability to defend its territory against Russia is dependent on the supply of high-tech weapons from its allies. Kyiv has repeatedly appealed to Israel for help, but Israel has so far restricted its support to humanitarian aid and pledges to help with rebuilding. It's keen to maintain a neutral stance and to not upset Russia, but the Israelis have offered to deliver an early warning system to alert civilians when Russian missiles are heading their way. Here's a look at how much of a difference the system might make.
When Russian missiles target Ukraine's cities, it's the Ukrainian Air Force that raises the alarm. It uses both radar and intelligence information to detect attacks. Over the past year, Russia has pummeled Ukrainian cities with air raids and drone attacks, destroying infrastructure and, all too frequently, killing civilians too. So could Israel's renowned early warning system, built to warn of Palestinian rockets, help save lives in Ukraine? The system in Israel includes a cell phone app, which most Israelis have. It produces an alert when a threat is identified. The system uses a mix of radar and electro-optic devices to detect an incoming air raid. It also triggers sirens and messages on television and radio. It can classify both the size of the threat and pinpoint on a map the areas that are in danger. So it's very specific, at least when it comes to predicting the rockets typically fired by Palestinian militants. They keep to a ballistic trajectory, making it possible to predict the area where they'll hit. Russian forces in Ukraine, by contrast, mainly use cruise missiles that can change their direction. That makes it much harder to calculate where they'll hit. Still, during a visit to Kyiv last month, Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen renewed a pledge to help Ukraine develop a similar system for its citizens. The process is expected to take several months and will initially be a pilot project that will only cover one city, likely Kyiv. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed this commitment. But what Ukraine really wants is Israel's multi-layered missile defence system, including the famous Iron Dome. This system actually shoots down missiles and is extremely effective. But supplying that is a step that Israel is so far not willing to take.
For more, we can bring in DW correspondents Amian Asif, who's in Kyiv, and Tanya Kremer, who joins us from Jerusalem. Amian, we just heard in that report that Israel has offered Ukraine an early warning system for missiles, but not the Iron Dome, not this missile defense system. Why is this dome so important to Ukraine?
Well, the most obvious answer is because it would include weapons. It would include missiles. And this is important to Kyiv because after a year of war with Russia, these are in short supply. But the weapon system, Iron Dome, is also part and parcel of the early warning system. That's another reason why they want it. And but we have to keep in mind this wouldn't be a game changer for Ukraine. We already have an early warning system. My phone gets a buzz when they suspect an incoming missile attack. So there's also a political aspect to this. Ukraine believes that if it can get the Iron Dome system, that this would break the ice with Israel and allow Ukraine to have access to even more of Israel's arsenal. It would also send a message to Russia that Israel is no longer sitting on the fence and is a part of the Western alliance that is sending actual weapons to Ukraine.
Tanya, if you could help us understand the Israeli perspective, why isn't Israel willing to offer Ukraine the Iron Dome?
Well, as you said, it has taken a very cautious approach since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, mainly out of its own geopolitical interests, but also it tries to keep a good relationship with Russia on the one hand and Ukraine and also its closest ally, the United States. And as we've heard, it has pledged and sent humanitarian aid in the beginning of the war. They established a field hospital in the early days, also helped the Jewish community in Ukraine. There's also talk about intelligence sharing, but it has kept a strict policy of not getting too involved by sending any weapon systems. And that's why we are seeing now with the foreign minister again pledging to send the early warning system to Ukraine, which is, as my colleague said in Ukraine, tied to the Iron Dome system, because here in Israel, I mean, it's a much smaller country as well. When missiles are being shot at, then it's projected where the missile will be heading, and then the Iron Dome comes into play to shoot it down. It doesn't do so when it will fall into an open field, for example. We understand that Ukraine is also interested in other missile defense systems like the Iron Beam, which is not yet fully functional, or Arrow, or the David Sling. But so far, and mainly out of political reasons, I would say Israel has not been keen on delivering any weapons to Ukraine.
And if you could just explain to us again Israel's relationship with Russia and Ukraine, because it is quite a balancing act, isn't it?
It is. It is a very complex situation that's also evolving the longer, of course, the war goes on. And when you're talking to experts here, they're mainly pointing at this close coordination that Israel needs to maintain with Russia over the Syrian airspace. Russia is an ally of the Syrian regime. It partly controls the airspace, and Israel is carrying out airstrikes, what is being described here against Iranian targets or by its proxy militias, delivery of weapons. It wants to refrain, it wants to prevent Iran of becoming entrenched at its northern border. There are also other countries involved. So that is the main concern. The other concern we're hearing here is sometimes as well that there's concern about the fate of the Jewish community. There's a big Jewish community in Russia, and Israel doesn't want to antagonize Russia. But there also has been criticism over the past year here in Israel, because, they are saying Israel should deliver more on moral grounds. And of course, now with the deepening ties also between Russia and Iran over the use of drones, that is also a worry for Israel that is very, very closely watched. But I think you can say the bottom line is, and we have seen actually 3 Israeli prime ministers in the past year, from Naftali Bennett, who actually tried to mediate. We have now Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has a very close relationship in the past with the Russian president. But the bottom line is is an early warning system, yes, but no weapon system.
And Amian, could I ask you, I mean, how do Ukrainians see Israel? Do they see Israel as an ally?
Well, I'll give you an idea. Zelensky said in September that he was shocked because Israel had sent nothing, zero. Now, it's hard to imagine for many Ukrainians why Israel isn't supporting Ukraine more. They see Israel as an ally, but not a close ally. They're also skeptical of how Israel has offered to negotiate a treaty with Russia, which for many Ukrainians sounds like giving away Ukrainian territory. But Zelensky does know that Israel can be an ally, and that's why we see him courting Israel here, trying to bring him into the fold of Western countries who are close allies with Ukraine.
DW's Amian Essif in Kyiv and Tanya Kremer in Jerusalem. Thanks so much to you both.